I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Hello everyone!
Everybody.
Welcome to Mastering the Tides Water Element Guide. Today we're going to be talking about the element of water in Battle Zoo Eldamon. Now, water can mean a lot of things depending on where you're looking at. In some places, water is the healing element. In other places, water is the illusion element. In Eldamon, water is an element of tides. High and low tide to push and pull your foes while also changing your defense and offense between the two tides. So let's talk about the basic principles about the water element before we get into the powers, the power builds, and then the Eldamon themselves. Alright, so, and Thorgrim is already talking about Etmoist, which is one of the Eldamon that we're going to be looking at. So for the water element, one of the key things is that your allies, when they're in the area, you can push and pull them any exact distance that you could push and pull a foe without them rolling a saving throw. So if you could push a foe 10, 20, or 40 feet, depending on their save, you could push 10, 20, or 40. You can't do 30 or 35. The water is not exact enough for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you also don't harm them. So water is very, very friendly towards your allies. You're always able to be moving them around in the direction of your tide. High tide pushes away. Low tide pulls towards you.
Mm-hmm. And high tide is generally the more offensive.
High tide usually does more damage and actually debuffs your defenses or something else or does something negative to you. And low tide does less damage, pulls them towards you, and usually buffs your defenses in some way. Although sometimes it does something slightly different, such as give you a longer range on a melee attack, because how can you pull something that was already next to you?
Yeah, but generally that synergizes, because if you're grabbing your enemies close to you, you're better defended, whereas if you're shoving them away and out of the range of easily attacking you, then you're more vulnerable if they do manage to get you.
That's right. So, how did we shift between these tides? The Shifting Tides ability tells us, when you roll initiative, choose to start in high or low tide. When you refresh your powers in an encounter, or when you phase in an Eldamon, you also choose to start in high or low tide. This is your initial tide whenever you use a water power, including reactions, so keep track of that. Reactions can be a way to shift this around. You immediately gain the effect from the tide you're in and then swap to the other tide, alternating between high and low tide until you refresh, in which case you can switch to whichever one you want at that point. Also, the bludgeoning attacks from water actually move water, so they don't take any penalties underwater, even if bludgeoning sometimes would. So those are all the things we need to learn to get into water. Water is one of the more complicated elements because of the fact that you have to understand the tides.
And you have to decide which powers do you want to use on high tide versus low tide, and how are you going to use that cycle to your advantage.
That's right. If you can understand the cycle of the tides, water is one of the strongest elements. But if it goes against what you want because you're off rhythm, can be tricky, because you need to understand the rhythms of both your refresh rhythm and the high and low tide rhythms, and use your tides correctly. You don't want to just randomly pick which tide that you start in.
So you may be in a situation where, do I want to do my reaction? Is this a good time to switch my switch my tide cycle, or is it not?
So let's look at your starting set of options. You've got Aqua Punch. It's D6s of damage with a melee attack roll. On high tide it does D10s. Doesn't have any debuff like normal for some of these high tides, but the debuff is that you actually have to be next to them. It doesn't give you any other debuffs.
Yeah.
Low tide does not go up to D10s of damage, but it can make its melee attack roll within 30 feet or within your reach if that's actually better than 30 feet somehow. And it originates from a square.
That takes some doing.
It originates from a square of your choice within that range, which means that it could change cover, right? Because if you're attacking something 30 feet away and you're standing there and they're 30 feet away and there's barrels or something in between.
Then you attack. You make a melee attack.
You make the attack from behind them or something.
Does that also work with flanking and things like that? If the direction of origin of the attack is opposite?
It says you can't use it if they have total cover at all.
But
and
like
you need a line of effect.
But like if your allies on the opposite side of the origin.
It says it might allow you to punch, to ignore other types of cover, or to flank a target by attacking for a different direction. So yes. In fact, you could do it to potentially flank with yourself.
That was going to be my next question.
If you're on one side, you could attack from the other side with low tide. Of course, you're only doing d6 of damage. Now, in low tide, also, if you hit, they take a penalty on their attack rolls. -1 or -2 on a critical success. So, it also gives you a defensive buff in terms of the fact that if you did hit and pull them towards you, they're taking a penalty on attack rolls for 1 round. And it moves them 10 feet if you hit, 20 feet if you critically hit. And if you miss, they can choose whether to be moved 5 feet or to be off guard. They get to pick. So it still pushes or pulls them 5 feet, or if they don't want to move, they can just be off guard. The critical failure does nothing.
Yes.
So that's our Aqua Punch. On Sea Spray is our other option. It is going to be D4s of damage in a 15-foot cone, which goes up to 35 at 17th level. It goes up by 5 feet every 4 levels. Now, with High Tide, we go up from D4s to D6s. But in exchange for that, we are off guard until our next turn. And, of course, it's going to move them away if they fail 10 feet or even 20 feet on a critical failure, which moves them past the edge of the cone on a critical failure.
Well, either way, they're probably going to need to move to get up to you.
Correct. And on low tide,
instead of just
you gain a +1 circumstance bonus to AC at the beginning of your next turn, which increases to +2 against creatures that didn't critically succeed on their save, and +4 against creatures that critically failed. So if they're affected at all, you get a pretty good AC boost.
So that, I mean, you're going to be attacking them at a closer range than the other power, but
it's going to drag them. The people who you get +2 AC against are basically next to you by the point that they're done with being hit by a low tide Sea Spray, except for at high levels when it's a bigger code. And certainly, even at high levels, they're probably next to you if you've gotten the +4 AC because they critically failed. So those are your 2 active powers. You need to think about which one will be high and which one will be low tide. They might both be high tide if you can throw in a low tide version of your reaction, however. Your reaction is Retributive Wave. When a creature hits you with a melee attack, you can knock your foe toward or away from you, depending on your tide. Now, the difference is that a low tide version of Retributive Wave might not be as useful. So on a success, the creature, if they succeed on their fortitude save, they can choose whether to move 5 feet in the direction of the tide or become off guard.
So if they're already adjacent to you, then they're just like, I'll move.
They're going to choose to move.
And then it won't do anything.
And it won't do anything if you're doing low tide. On a failure, you move them 10 feet in that direction. If you're at low tide and they were already next to you, they become off guard automatically.
But there are a lot of creatures that have reach, for which it'll be convenient to, instead of having them attacking you from their reach, be right next to you.
That's right. Also, if they were next to you and you were low tide, they become off guard. And with critical failure, they move 20 feet. If you're low tide and they were already next to you, they become off guard for 2 rounds.
Oh, right, I see. So the failure, they're off guard if they were already next to you, but on the success, then they can just ignore it if they happen to be next to you.
If they happen to be next to you, they can just choose to not become off guard.
Gotcha.
They can just choose, I'll let you move me. It doesn't do anything. That's correct. So the off-guard version of it does not help you on a success for low tide. Now, obviously, on high tide, you're pushing them away no matter what. It's a reaction. So the high tide reaction can be very annoying to your foes because if they don't have reach, they're probably going to choose to become off guard on a success so that they don't get knocked back and be forced to step to attack you again.
And that's really going to help you when you're attacking them next turn.
That's right. So that is basically what we're going to do.
What about the refresh power?
And then we're going to refresh with Bubble Swarm. We create countless water bubbles that push our foes. We move foes within a 20-foot emanation depending on their fortitude saves. Then refresh powers, changing to whichever tide we want. So if we've ended in high tide, we're going to push them 20 feet up to, in a 20-foot emanation, 10 feet on a failure or 20 feet on a critical failure away. If we're ending on a low tide, we'll pull them 10 or 20 feet towards us. And it has a low tide benefit of +2 AC until the beginning of your next turn.
So
The high tide doesn't do more damage, but it also doesn't have a debuff.
Yeah.
Just because pushing them away is better than pulling them in general.
And then so this one lets you choose at the end whether you want to be in high or low tide. So you can switch or you can retain.
Well, the power doesn't. Just refresh. We already mentioned at the beginning, whenever you refresh, you could be in high or low tide. And so the power reminds you that the fact that you refresh meant that you can just decide which tide you're going to be in. So if you do, for example, high tide attack, low tide reaction, high tide attack, low tide refresh, then you can be back at high tide. Or you can do, if you didn't get the reaction, high tide attack, low tide attack, high tide refresh, and stay in high tide if you want to be super offensive. Anything like that will work. It also depends on where the enemies are and where your allies are for the areas, because with the Sea Spray, you can use Sea Spray to jettison your allies who are in the cone 20 feet forward if you want, or 10, whichever is better for them.
Or sometimes it may be better to gather your allies in close.
That's right.
Help move them toward the enemies.
So Hydro Bullet and Ocean Torrent were the ones we can pick when we get to level 3. We're going to pick between one of those two to replace Sea Spray or Aqua Punch as our options. So when we have when we have a Hydro Bullet, it is a ranged attack within 60 feet. It does D4s of damage. It increases to D8s in high tide, but we become off guard until our next turn. And at low tide, it doesn't originate from you and go up to 60 feet away. It originates from somewhere within 60 feet and flies towards you. It still doesn't work against total cover or with a lack of line of effect. But it can also ignore other types of cover by shooting towards you.
So as long as you can see them at all, you can pick a favorable line to attack them from.
Correct.
So I'm seeing off guard popping up a lot here, both as a thing for your foes and as a thing for you.
It's more likely to happen for you than your foes in water. Foes becoming off guard is usually because they chose not to move in one where they were given a choice whether or not to move.
Yeah. Well, I think is that in part because I've also seen off guard generally used as an alternative to prone for while you're in water, because you can't be knocked prone in water, but off guard sort of represents whoa, I'm not quite swimming correctly.
Yeah, but it's a very common alternative to some control effect that you don't want to give automatic control effects on. So that's more what it's being here. But also it is true that knocking someone prone wouldn't necessarily work in water. Yeah. That said, prone is a thing that happens in some of these powers.
Yeah, but
because
I just know
we figured that most things are going to happen on land, whether you're in water or not.
But I know that when I've done design for water-based abilities that mess people up, I usually go with off guard because of that. But I guess that's usually often water monsters that you're definitely fighting in the water. So there's different considerations here.
That's true. Well, we didn't want knocking prone to be the main thing of water, which it could be, but then it wouldn't work underwater. So there are a few things that knock yourself or other people prone.
Does D&D let you knock people over in water? I don't know.
D&D, I think, doesn't also, but it may just not say. Because a lot of cases, it just doesn't say. And so you're going to have to decide. Also, you can stand up and it uses half of your movement. So, on a critical success with Hydro Bullet, they're pushed or pulled 20 feet. On a success, they're pushed or pulled 10 feet. On a failure, they can choose whether to take a grazing hit for a little bit of damage or be pushed or pulled 5 feet. Usually, they'll take the 5 feet unless it's really annoying, and in which case they'll take the damage.
Yeah.
So Ocean Torrent is going to be a 40-foot line that does D4s of bludgeoning damage, and it can go up to an 80-foot line at 19th level. Every 4 levels it goes up by 10 feet. At high tide it does D8s of damage, but also is at the cost of your own endurance, so you take a penalty on fortitude saves until the end of your next turn. At low tide, instead you build your endurance by gathering the water from the torrent and gain a bonus on your fortitude saves until the end of your next turn. And once again, it'll push or pull 10 feet on a failed save, and it will push or pull 20 feet on a critically failed save. So Hydro Bullet can be a good one if you're facing off against single targets. And Ocean Torrent is definitely better if you're going to be facing off against several foes in a slightly closer area. Also, if you need to, for whatever reason, if you want to use Ocean Torrent as your low tide to get a Fortitude save bonus.
Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing some more variabilities. We're getting into more powers about what kinds of debuffs come into play with high tide and what kinds of buffs come into play with low tide. So you can also use those strategically based on what your opponent is throwing at you.
If your opponent doesn't do anything with Fortitude saves, it's a good time to take the penalty to Fortitude saves.
Mm-hmm.
So at 5th level, as usual, we're going to have to take 2 powers. So they're either going to be both of the offensive powers or one of the reactions. Now, if we're not an elemental avatar, we don't have to take them. We can just... Oh, and we could even go back and take the other 3rd level one as well. We're going to wind up with 3 active powers, though, so we really do need to take 1 active power. Like, we literally have to. So, at 5th level, Storm Surge is a 30-foot emanation, D4s of bludgeoning damage. On high tide, it does D8s, but gives you a -2 circumstance penalty to reflex save as the sudden surge disrupts your reflexes. On low tide, it will let you leap out of the way of enemy effects by gathering the surging water for a +2 on reflex saves. So, as usual, you can push our allies outward or drag them inward depending on the situation. Once again, it is a 10-foot movement on a failure, but this time it is a 10-foot movement that knocks them prone at the end of it on a critical failure, which can be extremely obnoxious on high tide for enemies who get pushed 10 feet and then knocked prone.
Because then they have to stand up and move toward you if they want to attack you.
That is correct. Now, our other choice for an offensive power is Unrelenting Jet. So Unrelenting Jet is another good one if we want to make a single target build, perhaps because you're an Eldamon trainer and you decided this Eldamon, I'm only going to bring them out against solos.
Yes.
And so then you would keep Aqua Punch, Hydro Bullet, and then take Unrelenting Jet, which is also single target. Meanwhile, Storm Surge, Ocean Torrent, and Sea Spray are all AoE. So if you want an all AoE build, that's easy to do as well. So,
well, you may want to mix and match a little bit, especially if you're an avatar and you know you're going to be facing against different types of opponents. And
also, keep in mind that all of these saving throws are Fortitude saving throws so far. Except for, let's see. No, they all are. There's some
even
that are
Sea Spray,
reflex.
which, because like those types of cones are usually reflex, but that's Fortitude.
It's Fortitude because it's about pushing.
Yeah. So it's
most
Fortitude,
of them
wasn't there one against AC, or is it all?
So that's one of the, no, all the attack rolls are. All the saving throws are Fortitude. So that's another reason why you might not want to have all 3 Fortitude, especially if you're an elemental avatar. Some foes have very strong Fortitude saves, or Constitution saves in Dungeons and Dragons. So Unrelenting Jet calls an orb of water that fires a continuous jet against a foe to prevent them from approaching or fleeing. It does D4s of damage within 60 feet, which sounds a lot like what we already could do from Hydro Bullet. But the difference is that, well, on high tide we do D8s, but we take a -2 penalty to AC until the end of our next turn. It's a untyped penalty. And low tide, we take the target takes a -2 circumstance penalty to attack rolls against us because of the jet getting in their way, unless they critically succeed. So what's different? What's different is that if they succeed at their save, they take half damage, and moving against the jet, aka towards you for high tide and away from you for low tide, is difficult terrain for a round.
So
if on a failure, they take full damage. You move them 5 feet, only 5, which is not as much as the other one. But moving against the jet, aka either towards you for high tide or away for low tide, is greater difficult terrain. It costs 3 squares. And on a critical failure, you move them double damage 10 feet, and they cannot move against the jet for a round. They cannot move towards you for high tide or away from you for low tide. So they're stuck next to you or circling around you at low tide.
So then the jet wouldn't necessarily be visualized as like a single water cannon, but is instead like a tracing water cannon that always follows them, so they can't like walk around and move out of it.
Yeah, it's continually shooting at them through the entire time.
Yes.
And for an entire round. It only deals damage on the initial impact. So that one could potentially give you some nice control. The reaction, if you didn't like Retributive Wave pushing or pulling them when they hit you in melee, you could take Liquefy Air, which can actually help you against a ranged attack. Basically, you liquefy the air between you and the creature that's attacking you, and if it's physical, the triggering attack's range increment is halved, as if you were underwater, and it takes up -2 circumstance penalty if the attack was bludgeoning or slashing. Reduced range increment could result in you being beyond the attack's maximum range, in which case it automatically misses you.
Oh, that's convenient.
but it probably won't.
Mm-hmm.
You also gain resistance against acid and fire damage as if you were underwater. You're basically liquefying the air.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you are underwater, it makes the water even more viscous and increases the circumstance penalty to -4 and extends the penalty and range increment reduction to all ranged weapon attacks and ranged unarmed attacks, even if they aren't physical. But the range increment reduction for the power isn't cumulative with the normal reduction to range increment for piercing ranged attacks underwater.
So you're not going to just, like, keep stacking the penalty up into the stratosphere.
Correct. So it's good if people attack you in range, whereas Retributive Wave is good if they attack you in melee. So think about if you're going to be trying to pull people towards you with low tide, or if you're going to be pushing them away with liquefy air, and they might, with high tide, and then you might need liquefy air if you think they're going to make ranged attacks against you instead. Obviously, also liquefy air is more effective in Starfinder. The problem being there are a decent number of energy attacks that aren't acid or fire that aren't going to care quite as much about what you do with physical attacks. In fact, if they shoot you with like an ice gun in Starfinder or a lightning gun, it's not going to be affected by liquefy air at all. You shouldn't even use the reaction in that case. So keep in mind that even though there aren't specific high or low tide effects for liquefy air, it is still a water power, so it can be a way to change the tides. Now, at 7th level, we're either going to take the active powers Bubble Burst, Flowing River, or the Refresh Power Water Barrier, which we can take instead of Bubble Swarm. So, Bubble Burst summons a gigantic bubble around our foes in a 30-foot burst, which then explodes, pushing them outward or drawing them in. Unlike most powers where it's based on us, in this case, the push and pull are based on the center of the bubble.
And a 30-foot burst is
it's
really
30-foot
big.
burst within 120 feet. So, on high tide, the damage is D8s. We take a -2 penalty untyped to AC until the end of our next turn. Instead of pushing away from us, it pushes from the center of the bubble. On a low tide, foes in the area take a -2 to attack rolls against us, unless they critically succeed, and it pulls them towards the center of the bubble. If there's not enough space near the center of the bubble, creatures nearer to the center move first. Others move as far as they can without being blocked. And so it moves them 5 feet on a success. Unstoppable 5 feet on a success is our first one. 10 feet on a failure and 20 feet on a critical failure.
So this is really interesting tactically because since it's based on the center of the bubble, it's possible that high tide could be moving creatures away from you, or low tide could be moving creatures.
That is correct.
Or low tide could be moving creatures toward you.
That is depending on where they are.
And you can just and it could be like some creatures moving farther or closer, or like there's a lot you can do with exactly how you place this on the grid.
That is right. So, a flowing river flows us forward in a rush of water, leaving behind a winding river to batter our foes. We either stride or tumble through, leaving behind frothing waters in all the spaces we enter. Foes who start their turn in the waters or pass through take d4s of bludgeoning damage with a fortitude save only once per turn, even if they cross it several times or start and then cross. High tide makes it be d8s of damage. As well, after completing our movement for Flowing River, we are immobilized until the end of our next turn with high tide. But when we move a creature away from us, they must follow the path of the river instead of moving directly away. So, if you think about it, you go through some weird path, and they kind of get pushed along the path backwards, the opposite of the direction you came.
So then, okay, yeah, I see.
With low tide, after completing our movement for Flowing River, we gain a plus 30-foot status bonus to all speeds until the end of our next turn. And when we move a creature towards us, they must move along the path of the river directly towards us. And on a success, they are moved 10 feet along the path.
What
on
happens
a
if
failure,
you, like...
20 feet, and on a critical failure, 30.
Okay, so what happens if, like, you have... if there's, like, some area in the middle that's dangerous?
Well, it's forced movement that's not directly away or towards us, so it would not work if it was going to send them into a death zone.
Yeah.
Because it only works if you push or pull directly away or towards.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to check, because I was thinking about, what if you had a lot of fire resistance or, like, electricity resistance? There was, like, a curtain of electricity, and then you were pushing yourself.
ran through it.
Ran through it to try to push or pull them through it. Because it's not like the direct push or pull. It has the usual force movement rules.
Well, they're all forced movement. And the rules of forced movement in Pathfinder say that if it's a direct push or pull away or towards, that that's the only time that you can put people into dangerous terrain. Now, some people believe that it just depends on if it says the word push or if it says the word pull. But just in case, because of the fact that some people thought that rule was ambiguous, the water key terms clearly states it pushes unless stated otherwise, and or it pulls directly toward you unless stated otherwise. And so they state otherwise. They don't say that they push or pull. They're one of these stated otherwise. So even if you ascribe to the interpretation that it only matters if the word push or pull is used, it is not used. It just says that they are moved along the path. So
rules, technicalities.
The refresh power is water barrier, which until the beginning of our next turn, bludgeoning and slashing attacks take a -2 circumstance penalty against us because we are surrounded in water, and we gain resistance equal to our level to acid and fire damage. And then we refresh our powers.
I mean, that's pretty. It's what it says on the tin. You're surrounded by a layer of water. It has all the effects of being underwater.
If you're already underwater, it's not going to help that much. So at 9th level, we can either choose Aqueous Embrace or Rushing Current. Aqueous Embrace, until we refresh, we can move adjacent creatures that hit us with a melee attack, as well as creatures that touch us or hit us with an unarmed attack. Not creatures we touch, ones that touch us. Depending on their fortitude save, then basically, Aqueous Embrace's effects don't depend on your tide when you use the power, but they instead shift each time you use another power with your current tide. So, if you think about it, let's say that we were high tide when we used it. We will now be low tide, and the Aqueous Embrace will have the low tide effects. Once we use another power at low tide, we'll be high tide. Aqueous Embrace will have the high tide effect. So it keeps changing what it's going to do based on the tide that we are currently at, which means it may start off doing the opposite of what you expect. So they roll a fortitude save. On a success, they do not move. And if they were already next to you at low tide, they take half your level of bludgeoning damage. On a failure, you can move them any amount up to 10 feet that you want, either away at high tide or towards you at low tide. And if you're at low tide and they were already next to you, they take bludgeoning damage equal to your full level. And critical failure, you can move them up to 20 feet away every time they attack you if they critically fail, if they're in high tide,
so
or towards you in low tide.
Movement possibility in this.
And if they were already next to you in low tide, they take bludgeoning damage equal to twice your level. So basically, it can help you pull in big enemies attacking you from reach with melee, or push things away in a way that constantly annoys them. If they fail, they're gonna have to move back if they don't have reach. If you're using high tide.
I see in chat, Kojo said, "When in doubt, clearly state otherwise." It's interesting with stating otherwise because you'll sometimes see the phrasing like "as usual" or "as normal" or something like that for when a rules reminder comes in. Because sometimes folks will think like if there's a rules reminder, that means they put that in here. That's clearly meant to say a special exception and all these other similar things.
It's never true anywhere else.
Yes.
So our other option from Aqueous Embrace is Rushing Current. We create a wide current and it then smashes into our foes. It's 60 feet long but 15 feet wide. Foes within the area, when we use the power, take D6s of damage. Moving against the current within the area, so towards us if we use it at high tide or away if we use low tide, is difficult terrain for a round. And at high tide, it does D8s of damage and gives us -2 on reflex saves. At low tide, we get +2 on reflex saves. Those are dexterity saves for Dungeons and Dragons. It moves them 5 feet on a success with half damage, at 10 feet on a failure with full damage, at 20 feet on a critical failure with double damage. And it annoyingly to them is difficult terrain, so if you're in a narrow area, they're going to be moved and it'll be trickier to get back to where they want to be.
Good luck reaching you with the melee attacks.
Now we're moving on to 11th level where we could pick up the final reaction Interrupting Torrent, but we also have two other options, Relentless Drench and Water Curtain, for active powers. So Relentless Drench drenches a foe within 120 feet, waterlogging them until they are clumsy and slow. They take D4s of damage. It's single target. It's long range, but single target. On high tide, they take D8s of damage, but the water drenches us too, and we are clumsy too until our next turn. On low tide, the water that drench our foe help us take action, and on our next turn we are quickened and can use the additional action to step, stride, strike, swim if we have a swim speed, or use elemental shield if we have it. And on a successful save, the foe takes half damage. We move them 5 feet in the correct direction, and they're clumsy 2 until the end of our next turn. On a success, clumsy 2. Think about that.
That's a huge debuff.
That's pretty good. It's not all the way as good as the the debuffs from the success effect of synesthesia, because that would be clumsy 3 and a 20% mischance for that turn. But it also does deal half damage, which on a high tide is actually pretty decent. On a failure, they take full damage.
Also, isn't the range longer than synesthesia?
It may be. On a failure, they take full damage. They are moved 10 feet away or towards you. They're slowed 1 for 1 round, and clumsy 2 until the end of your next turn, and clumsy 1 until you refresh.
Mm-hmm.
And on a critical failure, they take double damage, move 20 feet, slowed 1 for a round, clumsy 2 until the end of your next turn, and clumsy 1 for a minute. Which is usually more time than when you refresh.
Yes.
Technically, the refresh could happen before a minute, but it would be very
weird, yes.
Be outrageously unusual. So, your other active power is Water Curtain. You trace a curtain of water across the battlefield, damaging foes and moving like a wave, pushing creatures along with it.
So this is 3 actions, like the usual
3 action,
for the large battlefield effects?
5 feet thick, 10 feet high, up to 60 feet long, within 120 feet of you. If they cross it or occupy it at the start of their turn, they take d6s for half your level, so half as many d6s as usual. It lasts until we refresh. They take it only once per turn, even if they start their turn and cross it or cross it several times in the same turn. The curtain is greater difficult terrain for creatures without a swim speed. It's thin enough creatures can cross or exit as part of a stride without needing to use a swim action, like separately. Physical range attacks take a -2 penalty, and creatures within or on the other side gain resistance 5 to acid or fire against attacks that cross the curtain to reach them. And at the end of your turn on high tide, you can move the curtain up to 10 feet away from your initial position. And when we created it, if we do, creatures in the curtain or who enter the curtain during its movement move along with it. And on low tide, at the end of our turn, we can choose to move the curtain up to 10 feet towards us. If we do, creatures in the curtain or who enter the curtain during the movement move along with us.
So, just not entering the curtain isn't necessarily enough, because the curtain might come find you.
Now, you won't take damage while you're being picked up by the curtain, but you will then start your turn in it.
Yes, and then you'll take damage at that point, yes.
Because you won't cross it when that happens.
No, but you'll then start your turn in it, yes. You take the damage then.
Yep. So the curtain can keep moving around based on your tides. You need to keep careful control of where it is, but it can be very interesting.
Well, you can move your allies too.
That's right. Now, at 11th level, our other option is Interrupting Torrent, a reaction that will frustrate our foes who thought that they were fine. Finally, they get out of our movement. When a foe within 60 feet tries to take a move action, we quickly push or pull them depending on our tide, throwing off their positioning. The triggering creature must attempt a fortitude save with the following effects. Critical success, no effect. Success, move them 15 feet, then they take their movement. And so that's either away or towards you depending on high or low tide. Failure, move them 30 feet, then they take their movement. Critical failure, move them 30 feet, then they get disrupted and they don't get their movement. So basically, it's going to mess them up. If their movement is like around 30 feet, then it can potentially, the critical failure will put them in the opposite of where they want it to be.
Oh yeah, the picture of Otoro here reminds me, we have the plushie. I'm not sure where it is right now since we were playing.
That wasn't ours.
That wasn't ours we were playing with? Oh, okay. So then it would still be upstairs.
Yeah, it's upstairs.
Yeah. No, we were playing Eldamon games.
During Thanksgiving. With some of our cousins' children. So at 13th level, you have 2 choices: Cloudburst or Immortal Water Dragon. Now, it's hard to say no to something called Immortal Water Dragon, but Cloudburst is really good too. Cloudburst is a 30-foot burst within 500 feet that causes a downpour of water, dealing d6s of damage. It goes up to d10s with high tide, but knocks you prone. And on low tide, it conceals you from foes, and you become concealed until the end of your next turn, whether or not you're in the area. It also moves them away or towards you 5 feet on a success, 10 feet on a failure, or 20 feet on a critical failure. Okay, That's good. It's a really long range. It's a great area. What about Immortal Water Dragon? We form a long serpentine dragon that twists and turns, slamming into foes and pushing them toward or away from us, regardless of the dragon's current direction. The dragon is large. It starts at our space if we're at high tide, or another space within 120 feet if we're at low tide. Then it swims in a 120-foot long path of our choice, ending in our space if we're at low tide. All foes of the dragon's path take d6s of bludgeoning damage, depending on their reflex save. Now,
so you can just draw this line however you want?
Yes. It's pretty rad. It's a reflex save, which most of these things are not also.
Because normally with lines, like, the downside of lines is that it's hard to
but
hit
it's
multiple
not a
things
line.
that,
It's a 120-foot long path. Creatures are only affected by the dragon once, even if you pretzel, like, a shape that's all the way around them. Mm-hmm. At high tide, it does d8s, which is less than Cloudburst. But at high tide, you ride the dragon, moving along with it, but losing your balance, becoming off guard until the end of your next turn. So you move along that 120-foot path as well. At low tide, the dragon ends its movement in your space where it guards you. You gain greater cover from the dragon until the end of your next turn, or until you move out of the dragon's space, whichever comes first. It does not provide cover to anyone else. And it moves creatures 5 feet on a success, 10 feet on a failure, 20 feet on a critical failure. And it is going to move creatures directly towards or away from you, regardless of which, like, direction the path is. Mm-hmm. But keeping in mind that when we're riding the dragon, like, where we are is on the dragon.
Yes.
So we pick one of those two. They're both very good. You might even want to get the other one that you didn't get when you get to level 15, because you're going to get 2 of the level 15 powers, either 2 of the active or an active. And there's no more.
There's still there's hidden and miss too.
Hidden and miss is the other option at level 13. That's right. So at level 13, you could have taken hidden and miss as your refresh power instead of Immortal Water Dragon or Cloudburst. I don't know about that, but you could have done it.
But you could take it at level 15.
You could also take it at 15 instead of Flash Flood or Water Gel. Hidden Mist creates a cloud of vaporous mist in a 30-foot emanation, which lasts until the end of your next turn. You can then attempt to hide within the mist as part of the refresh power as the 2 actions. All creatures within the mist are concealed. All creatures outside the mist become concealed to creatures within it. You can see through the mist normally, and if you have wave sense, it applies within the mist, even if you aren't underwater. You then refresh. Mm-hmm. So it basically creates a 30-foot concealment that you can see through, and possibly better than see through. Because you can use your wave sense against creatures that may be trying to hide in there. Mm-hmm. If they
so you are hidden, but they are definitely not.
They are definitely not.
But this one would mess up your allies' vision.
It would mess up your allies' vision.
This is like one of the few things in this that can actually cause any problem to your allies.
That's true, but it does let you hide right away. It's pretty efficient. So at 15th level, you can either go back for one of the 13s. They are very good. Or you can grab one of the 15s that you're picking up. And Rico in chat says water is one of his favorites. I really like water as well. So Flash Flood or Water Gel are also good enough that maybe you want them both. Now at this point we're going to have 4 active powers though. So you'd have to even replace one of the ones that you got before if you take both of them in. So Flash Flood is a 50 by 50 area within 200 feet.
This is a pretty sizable area.
It is. Now, a 30-foot burst is like a longer diameter than a 50 by 50 area. But this is quite sizable. It's within 200 feet. Foes in the area take d6 of damage based on their fortitude save. It then becomes difficult terrain except for creatures with the swim speed until you refresh. Mm-hmm. That can be a while. It's a large area that does that. At high tide, it does d8s of damage, and you become off guard. Of course, it moves them 10, 20, or 40 feet on critical failure. The whole place is difficult terrain. It's very annoying for them. On low tide, the area retains water up to knee height and becomes greater difficult terrain to creatures without a swim speed instead of regular difficult terrain, which means you pull them towards you, and if you center the area like around you, it's going to be really annoying for them to get out of that area.
Yeah, but the difficult terrain here would affect your allies too, right?
It does.
Okay.
But you can always move your allies away if you're doing high tide.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could also position it in a place that doesn't have your allies.
It is a 50 by 50 area within 200 feet. Maybe your allies won't be heavily in that area.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe some of it, or maybe even level 15, your allies have found a way to get a swim speed by now.
Because they knew you were going to take Flash Flood. So water jail creates a prison of water to immobilize and potentially drown our foe. Probably not drown, but you never know. Choose a foe within 60 feet, and they are affected depending on their reflex save. The jail pops like a bubble if they break free, and otherwise it lasts up to a minute. While they're in prison, they're underwater and have to hold their breath or begin to suffocate. It also provides effects of being underwater. They're off guard unless they have a swim speed. They get acid and fire resistance, bludgeoning and slashing attacks, melee attacks. Are made with a -2 circumstance penalty.
All the type of things
Bludgeoning and slashing, range attacks it makes or that are made against it automatically miss, and it can't use fire spells or actions. At high tide, at the start of each of its turns, it takes bludgeoning damage equal to your level from the high pressure, but keeping up the pressure saps your strength, and you're enfeebled 2 as long as the jail lasts. At the end of each of the imprisoned creature's turns at high tide, you can move the jail up to 30 feet away from you. And this movement ignores their immobilized condition, because they're immobilized by the jail. At low tide, at the end of each of the imprisoned creature's turns, you can move the water jail up to 30 feet towards you. This movement ignores their immobilized condition, and you gain greater cover against them. Now, the reason why they take penalties and you can gain greater cover is because they might actually be able to attack you in the jail. It depends on how firmly they're in it. On a critical success, they don't even go into the jail. On a success, they're barely trapped in the jail. Escaping it is easy. They are immobilized until they escape against your power DC or succeed at a DC 10 athletics check to just swim out of it.
Which, DC 10 athletics check is going to be easier for everybody, right?
Correct. On a failure...
Why is the power DC even in there?
It's just in case. Maybe their acrobatics is that much higher than their athletics.
I guess that's true. There are some ridiculous
So
creatures
failure, they're completely imprisoned and immobilized until they escape against your power DC. So that's the one where they don't get to pick the DC 10 athletics check to swim.
Got it.
Also, I guess if they don't have athletics or acrobatics at all and have very, very bad strength, it could be that their attack bonus is the one they want to use on the escape. Critical failure, they're imprisoned and transfixed by the water pressure. They're restrained by the jail until they escape against your power DC, meaning they can't do anything except try to get out. They're just completely stuck in there. And Kojo says that, here's these as things from Naruto. Here's our second one from Hidden Mist Village. There you go.
There we go,
I mean, I think that water jail... If I remember when I was very young, that was one of the early arcs in Naruto. One of the many ways the Kakashi, the ninja teacher, who supposedly is great, but is basically like Worf from Star Trek, where he gets kicked out or defeated in every fight.
You can show how added powerful these enemies are by the fact that Kakashi always loses.
Or just that he was too strong, so they had to get rid of him so that the adventure could happen. And one of the ways they got rid of him so the adventure could happen was putting him in a water prison. So, yeah, it is kind of similar to that now that you mention it. So you can either pick both of them or pick one of them and something else from lower level. If you really love all the level 13s, you can get both of the other level 13s. I'm not going to judge you. Now for our most powerful non-ultimate at level 17, we can grab Calamitous Deluge or Tsunami. So, Calamitous Deluge, you can pour down an unending deluge of water in the area, feeding off its own power to damage and reposition your foes. It's a 20-foot burst within 120 feet. Foes in the area that start their turn in there take d6s of bludgeoning damage for every 2 levels you have. So it's half as many as usual.
But that's because it keeps going.
You move them 15 feet. It's 3 actions. It just keeps going. At high tide, instead of pushing them away from you, when the deluge moves the creature, they are moved away from the center of the deluge. The damage increases to d4 per level, which is higher than d6 for every 2 levels. It sounds like lower dice, but it's higher. You're off guard as long as it lasts. You may want to stay in the middle of it at that point because they're going to constantly be pushed out of it.
Yes.
Your allies can too. At low tide, it will pull them towards the center of it, and if there's not enough space, choose the ones near the center first. And you and your allies are concealed while you're in the deluge, though other creatures aren't concealed to you or your allies. Just you guys are concealed. So you also might want to stick in it at that point, but maybe near the outer edge. Or you could just stay out of it and hope your enemies keep getting pulled into the center. Your other option is Tsunami. That's a one and done instead of the overtime damage. So it is a 60-foot wide wave centered around your space up to 100 feet tall that rushes out to 120 feet away from you. Foes in the area take d6 of bludgeoning damage, which goes up to d8s for high tide, but you're knocked prone. On low tide, it begins up to 120 feet away from you and moves towards you instead of beginning centered around your space, and you gain greater cover from the tsunami until the beginning of your next turn. It moves 20 feet on a successful save, 40 feet on a failed save, 80 feet on a critical failure, and 10 feet on a critical success.
So they're just moving no matter what.
They still take no damage, but they do move 10 feet on the critical success.
So
it's a tsunami. Yeah. Even if you critically succeed at reflex
even your
against a
tsunami,
like,
I
jump out of the way.
I have evasion, blah, 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 they're moving.
And it's reflex, not fortitude, because nobody has enough fortitude not to get moved by a tsunami. Yeah. That was a double negative, but it's still true.
Understood.
All right. Now, your ultimate is going to be Leviathan or Charybdis. And Koja says, as a longtime Star Trek and Naruto fan, he's not going to be able to unsee that Kakashi is the Worf of Naruto. Kakashi is absolutely the Worf of Naruto. Except for the poor Worf wasn't so overpowered that they had to get rid of him for fights. They just showed how serious the aliens were. Mm-hmm. Whereas Kakashi was often so overpowered in those early things that they just had to get rid of him or there would have been no thing.
Mm-hmm. It was just like, Kakashi wins in 2 seconds.
He wasn't put in a water prison. He just kills everybody, I guess. So he was even worse than Worf, because Worf at least sometimes was not immediately defeated by another alien because he just didn't fight them, or they defeated them using some other ability. Mm-hmm. Alright, so our ultimate powers are either going to be Leviathan or Charybdis. Leviathan calls upon a mythical whale serpent of water that coils around foes, trapping them for a brief moment within churning metaphysical gullet unless they resist its call. It affects everything within a 200-foot radius emanation of you, dealing d6s of bludgeoning damage depending on their will save.
Mm-hmm. This is our first will save.
On high tide, it's d10, but we take a -2 on our will saves. On low tide, we pull the Leviathan's power into ourself. It blesses us with heroic might, giving us a +2 on attack rolls, perception checks, saving throws, and skill checks.
That's a lot of +2s.
Until the end of our next turn.
And it's a status bonus you'd expect for...
And it moves... It moves 5 feet on a critical success, no damage. 10 feet on a success, 20 feet on a failure, and 40 feet on a critical failure. So even the critical success moves 5 feet. Not as much as Tsunami, but it does have more damage than Tsunami on a high tide, and it gives us buffs on a low tide. Significant buffs. Charybdis is a swirling maelstrom of water in a 60-foot emanation that draws foes in or spits them out. It deals d6s for every 2 levels you have, but it's actually d10s for every 2 levels you have at high tide. So it makes us off guard as long as it lasts. And on low tide, we gain a +2 status bonus to AC as long as it lasts. And it on a crit success, they are unaffected, but it does last for until we refresh. On a success, they half damage, 10-foot movement. Failure, full damage, 20-foot movement. Critical failure, double damage, 40-foot movement. The same movement profile as Leviathan every turn, except that on a critical success, they're not moved 5 feet. Mm-hmm. So, what else do we have? If we're an avatar, we can pick up the locomotion.
I want to fetch our plushie while you do that, so I have it ready for when we talk about Boto.
So, Linda's going to go get Boto. I'm going to talk about the avatar ability. So, if you're an avatar, then with locomotion, we gain a swim speed. If we're in high tide, we gain a +10-foot status bonus to our swim speed. And if we're in low tide, we gain a +1 circumstance bonus to AC against reactions triggered by our swimming movement. The enhanced locomotion lets us use our swim speed to swim on land and into the air, calling a personal wave of water that carries us as long as we swim. If we're in a location that can't hold our weight, we fall at the end of our turn if we don't swim at least once during our turn, because we're just swimming through everywhere. Like Boto is doing right now. In elemental manipulation lets us control water in minor ways, allow us to move and filter small amounts of water, condense moisture in the air in a humid area into water, evaporate small amounts of water, perform other similar water actions. Elemental resistance gives us +1 circumstance bonus on saving throws against water effects, and resistance equal to half our level against water damage. If we have enhanced resistance, it's a +2 against water effects. Elemental Sculptor lets us sculpt water, moving substantial amounts of water up to 40 bulk, located up to 20 feet away, and taking up no larger than a 10-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot space, up to 20 feet of movement each time we do it. We can also sculpt the water's form into fanciful shapes. If the water doesn't have a container, obviously, if you stop doing this, it will splash into a puddle. Then Elemental Senses is a imprecise wave sense up to 60 feet, which we can then use with Hidden in the Mist if we have it. And Elemental Shield gives us resistance to acid and fire damage equal to half our level as long as we put up the Elemental Shield because it's basically a giant thing made of water. For Water Eldamon, this is cumulative with their base resistance. Because they already are resistant to fire from that being a thing that they're strong against. Elemental Surge, if you can't do a power in a turn and only have one action to surge, you can push if you're in high tide or pull if you're in low tide the creature 10 feet unless they succeed on a fortitude save. Since the Elemental Surge action isn't a power, it does not shift your tide.
Oh, that's good to know.
Only powers do, and it wants to remind you that it is not a power. So it does not shift your tide. There you go. So, as you can see, we have all of these powers. Now we want to look at which Eldamon are good to use those powers.
Boto!
Boto
Is a common friend.
Boto is common. Is a scheming dolphin. Evolution conditions to help Boto realize their schemes and fully connect between land and water. They are So basically, when you're looking at these water Eldamon, what you have to understand is that they have a slower movement speed. Like, most of them have 20-foot land and 25-foot swim, which is not that much slower, but it is 5 feet slower. Boto does not. But because of Boto's form ability, Amphibious Assault, which gives us land speed of 30 feet despite being a water Eldamon and a swim speed of 40 feet, we start with a 30-foot speed and a
35-foot swim.
35-foot swim. It should be a swim speed of 35 feet because the evolution ability says it increases the swim speed to 40 feet. Its form ability is typoed slightly. The elemental ability, Surging Currents, I would have had that right if I looked at the most up-to-date PDF. I'm looking at print copy, which is almost entirely correct, but that is like one of the few small errors. The elemental ability, Surging Currents, when you move a foe at least 10 feet with your water powers, you can move them up to 5 additional feet. When you move a foe at least 30 feet with your water powers, you can move them up to 10 additional feet. Very handy if that will push them into using another increment of their movement speed.
Or push them right to be next to one of your allies so that your ally is ready to attack them, or your ally can take reactions based on movement or things like that.
That's right. The evolution ability Tentacle Tail splits the tail into 8 tentacles, increasing its reach to 20 feet. Additionally, your land speed and swim speed increase to 40 feet. So it's a kind of an all-arounder. You can use it for whatever you want. Now, Poohide, the Eel Dragon Eldamon, is a little bit more specific. Poohide loves to hide, and its evolution condition is to cause it to accept and work through their nerves and fear.
I really appreciated that with the water dragon Eldamon had the art on the page right next to the immortal water dragon power.
That's true. Well, it does take the immortal water dragon power; it never loses it. So its elemental ability, Sinuous Backflow, is when you use an area water power. If you are in the area, or your area power originates from your square, like a line or a cone, you can choose to move yourself in the same distance that your allies would move. However, in the opposite direction. So basically, you like snuff out a cone, and then you knock yourself back 20 feet from that starting cone that you get at first level. You could do a 15-foot cone and then go back 20 feet. It's actually very, very useful to escape enemies when you're using the high tide, but it can be extremely good for closing the distance when you're using a low tide power where you're like, okay, this line is going to suck them in and I'm going to move towards them too. Yes. But it has to be that you're in the area or it originates from you, which some of the low tide ones don't. Keep that in mind. The form ability, Slippery Eel, makes it so that you gain a +2 on escaping and stealth checks to hide. If you roll success to escape, you get a critical success to escape. And its evolution ability, Dragon Soul, is when you help teach it to have a little bit more confidence. Gains a bonus on saves against fear. When it rolls a success on a will save against fear, it gets a critical success. And anytime it gains the frightened condition, it reduces its value by 1. So it's just hard to frighten it once it's gained its Dragon Soul. So Etmoist, the Water Shark Eldamon, is one where you can make your tides even more extreme. So Etmoist is wants to truly come to see the meaning of family, which is why Thorgrim at the beginning of that said that Epmois knows it's all about the family. So its elemental ability Raging Cycle causes power and defenses to fluctuate with the tides. After using a high tide power, you take an untyped -1 to AC for one round, which could be stacking with another penalty to AC from your tides. After using a low tide power, you gain a +1 status bonus to AC for one round. When using a high tide power, you gain bonus damage 2, 3, 4, or 5.
So you're really
depending
doubling
on your
down on
proficiency.
the impacts, on the typical impacts of the high and low tide on you.
Correct. The form ability, Crimson Gullet, is basically raging water energy within you that glows crimson when you're ready to use a high tide power. When you're in high tide, add a status bonus to damage rolls from Raging Cycle to 2, 3, 4, 5 to your unarmed jaw strikes. Additionally, if you succeed at a grapple check to grab a foe in your mouth, they take an amount of bludgeoning damage equal to that status bonus from the rampaging water energy, but only if you are in high tide. But the problem is that you know when you are in high tide, you might be taking some penalties after that, but you could stick in it when you're not taking the penalties to your AC and actually attack with your bite. The evolution ability Armored Spikes on Megalodrown, because it's Epmois, then Carcarain, then Megalodrown.
I like Megalodrown.
Speaking of which, Poohide goes into Anguilake, which goes into Kinglong, and Boto goes into Botorrent, which goes into Botoshin. So Megalodrown has armor spikes that pierce your foes. A creature that attempts a mainly unarmed strike or a non-reach melee strike against you, whether or not it hits, takes 4 piercing damage with a basic reflex save. At level 19, increases to 5. So it deals a little bit of piercing damage each time, even if it misses.
Yeah.
So that can be funny, especially if you also have a Aqueous Embrace, which of course they do have up through level 15. So then it's like, yeah, and I also push you away
yes.
too. So our rare, because those last two were uncommon, is Cuddle, the Cuttlefish Eldamon, which becomes Sepia, Seapia, and then Apamare. So Cuddle just wants to perfect the art of hugging with its tentacles. Its elemental ability is Tentacles of Water. You can transform the motive force of your water powers into tentacles that throw off your foe's stance. If your water power would move a foe at least 10 feet, you can choose not to move them at all and make them off guard until the beginning of your next turn, but not during your turn. If it moves at least 20 feet, you can choose not to move them at all and they become off guard until the end of your next turn. If you move them at least 40 feet, you choose not to move them, they become off guard for 2 rounds. Now, one of the things, even if it's not going to do an off guard that helps you very much, is that if your enemies are all together and in the area and you want to leave one that's closer to your allies and push all the other ones away after they all fail, you could choose to leave one. Even just mostly to separate them because they have good abilities working together or something like that. Your form ability, Grappling Arms, gives you a +1 circumstance bonus to athletics checks to grapple, and your athletics checks to grapple don't apply the multiple attack penalty from powers with the attack trait. They still apply any other multiple attack penalty, and they still increase your multiple attack penalty. If you're in your evolved form, the circumstance bonus goes up to +2 if you're in Apamare. And its evolution ability, Camouflage, lets us transform to any color to blend into the environment, allowing us to hide and sneak even without cover or being concealed. So, as you can see, this is like a pretty weird one, but it can be useful in the right situation. And when it hugs, the hugging is grappling with its tentacles. But it likes hugging. It says in the description, Cuddles are a rare water Eldamon in the form of a tiny round cuttlefish with big goofy eyes. Cuddles enjoy hugging, cuddling, and glomping onto things. They spend most of their time doing so whenever they find something with a proper phase they can interact with, given they are Eldamon. If that turns out to be a person or creature they can form a bond with, they hold on tight to their relationship with their beloved new friend and never let go. That's what it says about Cuddle.
I'm definitely imagining a Cuddle, like, riding on your head.
It might. So you can see that, for example, if you are Poohide, you want to take powers that are areas that originate from you. If you are Etmoist, you like your damaging powers from Raging Cycle. If you take something like Water Gel, then it does actually do damage on high tide, so you're okay. But you don't want to take one that doesn't do damage on high tide because it adds damage on high tide.
Yes.
In fact, Etmoist is better off with powers that do small damage on high tide because its bonus is a higher percentage of the damage. Like, for instance, Aqueous Embrace. Cuddle, on the other hand, likes doing increments of 10, 20, and 40 on its movement so that it can cause more of an off guard, and is more about when you use that movement. So most of these, except for Puhai, don't like strictly constrain which powers that you want to have.
Mm-hmm.
So those are your water Eldamon. As you can see, there's a lot of complexity of going back and forth, but it's not like a lot of toggles. It's either one or the other. It's binary. Even if you really mishandle it, it's not going to completely throw you off. But it could cause you to take debuffs when you didn't need it, or move enemies to the wrong
places
location.
that aren't useful, yes.
But if you use it well, it can be one of the strongest of all of the elements.
And generally for moving your allies choose if they want to be moved, yes.
Actually, you choose.
Or you choose. But I imagine like as a part of like your group dynamic, you'll be like,
don't be a jerk.
Hey Valoros, do you want to move this distance or this distance or this distance, whatever, yeah.
Valoros says, I wish this wave of water was alcohol.
Yes. Well, I was thinking about it from the perspective of like how much are you needing to do all the tactical stuff versus like having your allies think about some of that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to choose powers that work together well, and you want to choose them with an eye towards the high and the low tides. If you have one that you're just like, I never want the high or the low tides from, and then you have a bunch of others that you also would prefer to use on the same parity, you're going to wind up in a situation where you are forced to use the one that you never want to use the other side of on that side, and it limits how you can use any of your other powers.
So you're saying you want to pick some that you prefer on high and some that you prefer on low, so that you can.
If you're an avatar with water, you want to especially consider the option of taking the feats that give you more reactions, and possibly more reactions per turn, so that you can have more reactions prepared and thus use those reactions to control which tide you're in for your active powers more carefully. Especially given the fact that does Interrupting Torrent actually screw over your enemy if their movement speed is like a dragon and they have 180 feet? Maybe not. But your enemies will move a lot of the time. So Uninterrupting Torrent is the reaction that is going to trigger like a lot, unless your battlefields are incredibly static. If your enemies ever move, you can use it to change your tide.
And you're probably going to make them have to move by some of the things that you do with your power.
So think about those strategies that you use about moving your enemies, making them move away from you or towards you, wasting their actions, wasting their turns, and deal your heavy damage at just the right time when those penalties are not going to affect you. If you can do that, you will have mastered the tides and become the most powerful water user. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Please like and subscribe if you like this content, or join us to support, and stick around for a vote if you are here in chat live, because we are going to vote for next Saturday's episode.
Meanwhile, let's go ahead and give XP to all of our live viewers.
Everybody take some XP. Boom, XP given. So we're either going to build a hazard together, we can do an Ask Arcade Mark, Save My Game Q&A, GM Tools, Dark but Not Too Dark, Arcade Mark Plays, we can play a game, or an Eldamon element, or other. And other is player types and game design. I feel like that's like really
very broad. We need
because
to
you
narrow
have
that
to,
in.
Because player types, there's like an infinite number of ways to divide players by type.
Can you give an example of what player type you might be thinking of?
Almost all game design is going to have to be split among different player types. So I feel like that's like, there are going to be like 40 episodes that are about that.
Yeah, but I think if we can get an example or two of what you mean by player types, we might be able to narrow that down into something that we could cover in an episode.
It would also need to narrow down what types of game design as well. Even if you said, okay, well, the player types we're going to be talking about are like hardcore optimizers versus like beer and pretzels casuals specifically, then even that there's like a lot of different aspects of game design that you would want to consider for that.
In terms of like whether you're talking about complexity levels.
So Matt Guy Dave said more about designing to please people who are very different. Okay, so I would say then 6 is handling groups with extremely different preferences.
So that's more, yeah.
So that's going to be handling groups with extremely different
That would
preferences.
be more of a GM one.
And there's going to be GM/design, because be like, how much can the GM do it? How much can the game designer do it?
Yeah.
If the groups have extremely different preferences among their members.
Mm-hmm. Because the example was like a class, for example.
A class was given as one example, but like, you don't even necessarily need to make one class that everybody likes, no matter what their playstyle is, because you can make a class for that playstyle and another class for another playstyle.
You probably make like the class that's complicated and has all these ticky-tack levers versus the class that is more straightforward to play.
In fact, having classes that have extremely different playstyles is one of the ways that you can handle having a very different group from a game design
just like how the elements and have a lot of different playstyles as well as complexity levels.
That's right. But in some cases, having a class that's very simple and easy to learn versus a classes that are more complex can help people who are more of like Magic the Gathering Johnnies versus maybe Timmys who just in it for the excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Mad Guy Dave, it's come up but not dedicated because of the fact that we don't really subscribe to any of the divisions of player types as being like sort of elemental or exclusive. Just all of them are simplifications that could help you and might not help you, and that all of them can be useful and none of them are like conclusively correct, because our world is a wide and extremely like on a spectrum world of players. Going through each of the different lenses of player types that everyone has created helps you understand players more each time, but getting stuck on just one of them, if we did an episode where we were like, we're just going to do narrative versus gamist versus simulationist, for example, if you get stuck on one of them for long, it winds up making you get kind of unable to notice certain things that are like would be considered combinations or that wouldn't make sense based on those theories. But
but Kojo voted for 6, then changed the vote to 4, and Macdai voted for 4. I think that it could be interesting to try to use this as like a well to come up with a more specific idea.
I like handling groups with extremely different preferences. Because we usually say in our other episodes, if we're like, well, and if you have a group and they all are completely opposite, you may consider splitting them into two groups.
But what if you can't?
But we've never done it like, but what if we can't?
Yeah.
What if we have like the group from the Abyss, and not that no individual player is terrible or just supposed to be a bad person.
Yeah.
But they just have extremely different preferences from each other and have no overlap. But they're also like super close friends, and they're like, no, we have to play with these friends. This is how we get together. And they do not like the same thing as each other at all. We can talk about tools of like how a game can be designed to try to handle that, and how the GM can try to handle that as well. I think that's an interesting topic. There you go. And Math Guy Dave was trying to come up with a broad topic that can help get more viewers. Well, we'll see. We always like more viewers. So we will consider putting in that handling group with extremely different preferences from a GM and design perspective next time.
So let's see. So I see
it looks like we are going to be playing a game next time. So that'll be fun.
Sounds good.
All right. So catch us next time on Tuesday for our Eldamon Light element. At which point we'll have done all 11 elements that did not have very long Knights of Last Call things that I was in the chat of and talked along with. And then on Saturday we'll be playing a game. Take care. Have a good weekend. For those of you who are in the U.S. and this is still your Thanksgiving weekend, if you've still got relatives there, don't worry. They'll be gone soon.